Story 1. Not enjoying things you used to and becoming more withdrawn from friends and family can sneak up on you. Story 2. Most people don't wake up to find the day is already disappointing. That's when I finally realized I was depressed. Every day just felt negative and I didn't want to engage with it. However, normal people wake up to a new and fresh day. I want to feel that way again. Story 3. An excessive amount of sleep. You wake up after sleeping for 9 hours. After checking your phone briefly, if you even want to, you go back to sleep. You wake up again a few hours later, lacking the motivation to get out of bed and start your day, so you fall back asleep. In your mind, that's easier than making an effort. You wake up again, realizing the whole day has passed, but you accept it because who cares when you can fall back asleep yet again? These were my weekends and days off from freelancing for most of my 20s. For a while, work was the only thing that motivated me to get out of bed, due to bills. Eventually, drugs were introduced into my life, which led to a volatile substance abuse issue, making the entire cycle even worse. I craved sleep because I was so exhausted from using drugs, which kept me awake until the come down. I slept to avoid life. Story 4. Failure to activate. I have a checklist of activities I use to pick myself up when I'm spacing out. When I catch myself doom scrolling for hours, I try items from the list to see if I can shift into more intentional behavior. Usually, if I can start with easy creative activities such as journaling, reading, or going for a walk, I can transition into other productive habits like doing dishes after drawing. I never force it, but I offer options until something clicks. Typically, this approach works well. If I continue offering my checklist items and my internal response is consistently no for several days, that triggers my alarm about possible depression. If I realize I might be depressed, I change my tactics. I become stricter about essential chores like showering, cleaning up, and doing laundry, while being gentler with everything else. It helps me to figure out what's causing my depressed feelings when I'm in a clean space and taking care of myself. Most of the time, simply acknowledging my depression and making that behavioral shift is enough to turn things around. Managing my mental health as a person with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and autism spectrum disorder is much easier when I think of it as one big flowchart. Story 5. For me, it's when I stop singing to myself. I am always singing some made-up song about whatever I'm doing, to the tune of whatever real song is stuck in my head. When I stop doing that, I know my brain is done. Story 6. I will take a shower tomorrow. I am just feeling tired today. You may find yourself repeating this for several days until you realize how much you have neglected personal care, leading to feelings of depression and self-repulsion. The thought of getting naked and standing under the shower head becomes overwhelming. However, you push through and get in the shower, discovering that it is a comforting refuge, and you do not want to leave. Eventually, the hot water runs out, reminding you that life can be disappointing, even in moments that initially seem pleasant. Story 7. Currently battling mixed anxiety depressive disorder. Signs and symptoms can vary significantly. For me, they include not wanting to engage in anything beyond my obligations. At my worst, even fulfilling my responsibilities like work felt overwhelming. I avoided all social events, experiencing dread minutes before leaving and searching for excuses to stay home. Even spending time with my partner became a burden. This represents the depressive aspect, while anxiety added to my distress, making me feel bad about disappointing people and watching my life slip away. Inability to concentrate on tasks at all. Seeking constant escapes, whether real or digital. I would frequently take random trips to avoid my depressive and anxious thoughts, even if it strained my finances. Digitally, I would play video games while watching streaming content to drown out my feelings for countless hours. The only time I felt alive was when I spent a few days in a new city, walking over 20 kilometers a day. Persistent cynicism and negativity. Everything seemed to go wrong, and it felt like the world was against me. Fatigue, both mental and physical. While I did not have direct sleep issues, I would go to bed stressed and anxious, often experiencing restless sleep. Constant irritability. Everything annoyed me, and I lacked patience for trivial matters, leading to unwarranted anger. strained my relationships. My self-esteem plummeted. I felt inadequate and questioned my worth, leading to mistakes at work. My work environment contributed to my struggles, but my disorder was the primary cause. There are many other aspects, and it remains a significant journey, but I sought help 2 months ago, and the process has been tremendously beneficial since. Story 8. Turning into a zombie while just sitting there, not moving. This feels strange, but I swear I feel heavier. I can't hold my head or arms up, and I even walk slower because my feet feel so heavy. Story 9. The small things you used to do to get a dopamine rush no longer hold the same appeal or make you happy like they used to. For me, it was simply starting my day with a cup of hot tea and scrolling through Post Secret on Sunday morning. Story 10. Always feeling tired, withdrawn from everyone and everything, shopping for comfort, neglecting self-care, including brushing teeth, constantly seeking quick sources of pleasure, such as using a phone, watching adult content, and consuming alcohol. Lack of interest or enthusiasm. Story 11. Becoming obsessed with a television series or movie series and feeling like the characters are close friends can be an unusual experience. However, it often happens with shows that may not make immediate sense for someone to invest in. I have done this twice. I watched the 20th anniversary of Les Miserables on repeat. I don't know why, but it was very comforting. I also watched Lost Girl, a series about a succubus, on repeat. I haven't watched it since and completely forgot about it until it recently came up again. Story 12. Sleeping a lot and a lack of self-care made me realize I was depressed when I woke up one day at 2 p.m. and saw how messy and disorganized my room was. My skin was practically cracking because I wasn't moisturizing it. People often don't realize that these issues are early signs of depression and are usually mistaken as simply being lazy. Story 13. Unable to enjoy activities, feel withdrawn, have lost my appetite, and sleep excessively. I no longer want to care about hygiene. Story 14. I am a 48-year-old married father of 2 in the UK. I am currently medicated and have received therapy for anxiety and depression. Looking back, I identified that a key marker for my depression was feeling nostalgic about the past instead of being excited for the future. Now that I can manage my depression effectively, I rarely feel sentimental about the past. That's me. Story 15. Depression and anxiety usually affect each other in opposite ways. When you are depressed, you typically are not anxious, but when you are anxious, you usually are not depressed. I find myself overthinking, being suspicious, and worrying about a week before my depression hits hard. But everyone is different. Common indicators include a lack of joy in activities, withdrawal, and excessive sleep or fatigue despite not being active. If you are going through this, you will be okay. Whatever it is will pass like the seasons. Please always seek therapy and go to the emergency room if you feel unsafe. Story 16. Not feeling like doing anything. Not even activities you enjoy or that usually make you content. Story 17. Depression affects my eyes. My eyelids become heavy, making my big eyes appear smaller and half-closed. I look sleepy, even when I am not. While my body feels fine, my mind is exhausted. I can often distinguish between normal tiredness and fatigue caused by depression, allowing me to take action before it worsens. Story 18. I have struggled with depression since a young age. I experienced physical abuse from a teacher, and I often slept excessively to escape reality. Even now, I still have tendencies to sleep a lot, which confirms my depression. Story 19. I withdrew from people and places, wanting to isolate myself completely. I visited my local walk-in clinic this morning to sort out some antidepressants because I had let it go too far without asking for help. Now, I feel completely broken. Story 20. Laziness is not truly about being lazy. It's about losing motivation to engage in activities, even your favorite hobbies. Story 21. Isolating unusual sleeping habits, lack of motivation, irritability, increased alcohol consumption, increased cigarette smoking, decreased laughter, heightened numbness, lack of focus, and inactivity. Story 22. When I was sad, I understood the lyrics of the song. When I was depressed, I understood the meaning behind the song. Story 23. Messed up sleep schedule and irritability. Sometimes forgetting to do things. Apparently, my voice and tone change as well. Story 24. When I find myself staring at a turned-off television for extended periods or at a wall. Story 25. Not wanting to get out of bed, not wanting to talk, and dreaming of witnessing murder for some odd reason. Story 26. Wanting to quit activities that you love and not feeling the drive to return can be difficult. I was a competitive dancer and rode horses my whole life, but I stopped everything after depression took hold. Everyone was surprised when I said I was quitting. I love both of those activities very much and still talk about them often, which sometimes hurts. They gave me so much purpose, and giving them up shattered many things inside me. Yet nothing can make me go back, no matter how badly I want to. Story 27. Not wanting to chat with people and being withdrawn can lead to more individuals avoiding approaching you. Story 28. Ever looked at depression symptoms and felt confused because they resemble general life symptoms? I have been attending therapy for depression for over 15 years. If you've experienced depression throughout your life, there are several things that may have confused you growing up. Everyone seemed genuinely excited about the future. When you asked your peers what they wanted to be, they would shout astronaut or basketball player with enthusiasm. When you talked to them, they truly looked forward to their future. But you were unsure of what you wanted, and the idea of the future seemed more frightening than fun. An obsession with avoiding boredom. While kids always try to entertain themselves, a bored child can become easily frustrated. If the thought of boredom genuinely terrified you and being bored felt like a horrific experience, it may not have been boredom itself that scared you, but rather being left alone with your thoughts. You found yourself completely uninterested in challenges. In sports, video games, school, and more. You had no enthusiasm or even partial enjoyment when it came to challenging yourself. Story 29. I stopped singing. When I'm in a good mood, I sing along to the radio, the television, and the songs in my head. When things take a turn, I just stop. You can tell when I'm coming back up because I start singing again. Story 30. I stopped dreaming. Normally, my dreams are vivid and frequent. But when I notice I haven't dreamed in a while, that's when I know depression has crept in. Story 31. I am 41 and have been dealing with these feelings for many years. Sometimes I am doing well, and other times I feel overwhelmed. I won't tell anyone it will get better, but I can hope it does for all of us. Story 32. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, so it could be related to this, but I find myself struggling with excessive procrastination. I know I have tasks to complete. It is overwhelming how much I have to do. Yet all I can manage is to curl up on the couch or in bed, obsessing and stressing over what needs to be done, without actually taking action. Story 33. When taking a shower, drinking water and brushing your teeth feels like a lot of work. It's not just laziness. Story 34. It is important to note that you can experience depression without feeling sad or melancholic. It took me a long time to realize that what I was feeling was depression because I didn't feel upset about anything. It was just extreme exhaustion and lethargy that made it increasingly difficult to perform daily tasks and make healthy choices. Story 35. For clinical depression, sleep disturbances are common. Sometimes individuals may oversleep, but most often, it is insomnia, characterized by waking up after a few hours and being unable to fall back asleep. This can persist for several weeks or months and is quite challenging. Story 36. People often discuss excessive sleep, but for me, it was the opposite. I had never experienced depression before, so I thought I was just feeling really down. I couldn't sleep for more than 1 to 2 hours consecutively, and at most 3 hours per night. Some nights, I couldn't sleep at all. I also had no appetite, even though I loved to eat. The moment that made me think I needed to go to the hospital was about 2 to 3 weeks in. I was at the gym, the only place where I felt I could pause whatever was happening in my mind, and I just snapped. I was doing tricep rope pushdowns when I started to sob in front of everyone at the gym, seemingly from nowhere. I rarely cry, especially not in front of others. Depression is strange and affects people in different ways. Story 37. Losing interest in the things you love can be surprising. What starts as, I just can't be bothered today, I'll do it tomorrow, can turn into weeks or months of mind-numbing apathy. Story 38. Besides the obvious signs, sleeping too much, lack of hygiene, and disinterest, I have a peculiar tale of my own. I become dangerously depressed if I eat Baskin-Robbins pink bubblegum-flavored ice cream. I don't know what that's about. Dopamine-seeking sugar, whimsy, etc. But it's been enough of a pattern with me that I warn my family that if they see me with this ice cream, I need intervention. That said, you may very well have your own particular sign of depression, and if you do, I encourage you to let your loved ones know. You deserve to be here too. There's room for you at the table. Story 39. For me, the biggest thing I noticed was shutting out the world and living in isolation. I used to be a very active child, but after a few events in my life, I realized that I rarely, if ever, went outside. Instead, I stayed inside to play video games, skip school, and even stop talking to my really close friends. Story 40. General. I have been sleeping a lot, from 4 p.m. to 7 a.m. and from 8 p.m. to 2 p.m. I am choosing to prioritize sleep over everything else in an irresponsible manner. Specific to me, I love music and singing in the car. One day, I realized I hadn't sung in the car for a long time. Some days I would drive home in silence, which is unusual for me, and I wouldn't remember how I got home or realize that I didn't have music playing. Story 41. To those who are not messy by nature, when your room suddenly looks disorganized. Story 42. I have lost interest in activities that once brought me joy. I experience constant neck and back pain, along with frequent headaches. I feel unwell most of the time and often find myself either very angry or close to tears. Story 43. Not wanting to be seen in public. I became increasingly agoraphobic, experiencing panic attacks at the thought of going to a store or being at work. I gained weight from relying on easy-to-prepare meals and developed a strong dislike for everything, feeling as though all activities had become a chore. Story 44. You sleep more than usual. As a person who experiences depression, I can assure you that feeling increasingly tired is a sign of this condition. Story 45. Tired. Things are much harder to do if they aren't the easiest sources of motivation. Doing anything productive becomes increasingly challenging, and the drive for self-care, including hygiene, feels like a battle. Story 46. I can't engage in the activities I enjoy and often find myself zoning out in front of a screen during my free time. I have a strong passion for crocheting, reading, and baking, but during difficult periods, these hobbies feel overwhelming. Seasonal depression and significant physical changes have affected me deeply, and I haven't been able to enjoy my interests for several months. Story 47. How inconsistent my emotions were. I would go from being wired and energized to tired and lethargic in less than 5 minutes. I would be absolutely ravenous and incapable of feeling full, and then I wouldn't want to eat anything. I would be completely robotic to overly emotional at the flip of a switch. Story 48. You start saying forget it to things that you know could be bad for you. Ordering takeout for the third night in a row. Ordering that fourth drink at a work happy hour. Staying up way past your bedtime binge-watching TV shows or playing video games. Story 49. Insisting that you are not depressed because genuinely depressed individuals attempt to harm themselves is misleading. Depression can manifest in various ways. Story 50. Loss of interest in your favorite activities. Loss of concentration and difficulty with simple tasks like personal hygiene. Intense mood swings. The most significant issue, a feeling of apathy towards everything. Story 51. Constant exhaustion even with significantly increased sleep. Eating habits have been inconsistent, ranging from barely eating for days to binge eating until discomfort. Engaging in extreme escapism, whether through obsessive writing, excessive sleeping, binge reading, spending entire days with video games or television, or endlessly scrolling social media. While people often mention losing interest in hobbies due to depression, it can, at times, be quite the opposite. Story 52. I noticed it was serious and ongoing when I began losing interest in things that used to make me happy. Story 53. Not eating enough for sure. I always find it leads to drinking too much as well, but since I have gotten older, I do not go down that rabbit hole as much as I did when I was in my 20s. Story 54. As the house starts to get dirty, I notice that I feel less motivated to take showers or brush my teeth. I begin to want to lie in bed whenever I do not have to be doing something else. Additionally, I slowly start to notice the creeping apathy. Story 55. Loss of interest in activities we once enjoyed, a general sense of displeasure, an inability to feel happy, and persistent feelings of tiredness and melancholy. This may also involve repetitive thoughts and guilt. Story 56. I experience persistent fatigue, and my immune system weakens, making it easier for me to get sick. Story 57. The first thing is probably that I don't care about my goals. I usually make an effort to write yearly goals for myself and immerse myself in the feeling of how it would be to achieve them. This year, I had another episode around that time in January, so I still haven't written anything down. I am not an ambitious person. It's just something that indicates I am healthily engaging in my life. Story 58. Apathy indicates a lack of desire to engage in activities you once enjoyed. You may find yourself forcing yourself to eat. Caffeine seems ineffective for boosting your energy and instead makes it more difficult to sleep. Story 59. Chronic irritability and feelings that are out of proportion to the situation, along with a desire to isolate and push people away. Story 60. Lack of self-care is definitely an issue. I am not keeping up with my skincare, not sleeping on time, not taking baths when I should, and not tidying my room. When I feel depressed, I often feel unattractive. Story 61. Thank you all for expressing my thoughts. The posters and commenters here have accurately captured the essence of the issue. Regular people may not understand it, and that is acceptable. It is my burden to carry. I wish everyone the best in this struggle. Story 62. If I am not washing the dishes promptly, that is usually the first sign. Dishes in the sink for 3 days is not normal. Story 63. When someone asks you what makes you want to see tomorrow or continue living, you may not have an answer. Your response might simply be that you don't want to face negative consequences. Story 64. Choosing sleep over activities I enjoy is something I often consider. I know I can still get 8 hours of rest if I stay up for a while to engage in activities like playing video games or guitar. However, sometimes I choose to fall asleep for 10 to 11 hours because I don't believe the effort will be worth it. Story 65. I was diagnosed with severe clinical depression in January 2023. Now I am much better. Therapy, medication, and psychiatry can work. The first sign that something was wrong came in the late spring of 2022. I started to feel bored with life, lost interest in things, and even happy events felt empty to me. I was in the middle of my PhD, so I thought I was just overworked and needed a vacation. By early summer, I began experiencing suicidal thoughts that worsened over time. By November, I was so anxious and stressed that I would stay in bed all day if I could and was barely functioning at work. My advisor noticed and asked me if I was okay because I seemed incredibly bored and unmotivated. By December, I realized that if I didn't seek help as soon as possible, I would be in serious trouble. I began having vivid dreams about harming myself and fantasized about it so much that I became scared to even get close to sharp objects. Also, I have had sleep issues for a long time, but by the end of 2022, I was experiencing severe insomnia. Story 66. I used to feel a sense of dread on Fridays near quitting time because I didn't want to face 2 days of uncertainty and not knowing how to be happy. At least when I was working, my unhappiness had a reason. Story 67. Watching television. Getting no work done. Hiding from the world. Food. Comfort food. Negative thoughts that I cannot handle. I cannot remember a time when I was happy. Story 68. I was getting frustrated because I didn't enjoy doing things I used to love. Activities I used to look forward to after work now feel like more work. A new game to play? I dread having to learn a bunch of controls and rules. Playing guitar? I would have to learn a lot of new music and patterns, and I worry I will struggle and it will take too long. Cooking new recipes? It will take too long, and who knows if anyone will like it. Working on my car? I fear I will probably make a mistake, and it will be expensive to fix. My wife pointed out my depression after several months of this. I'm still not over it, but at least I recognize that it's happening. Story 69. Intrusive thoughts. I recently realized I do not have any when I am feeling normal. The moment I experience one, I know I am slipping away, so I try to be extra careful about meeting my basic needs, especially sleep, food, and affection. Story 70. The only thing that prevents anyone from noticing is my obsessive-compulsive disorder. I maintain a clean appearance, and my obsession with cleaning keeps my house tidy. Deep down, I'm just a hair's breadth away from giving up, and every day I hope something will change. However, I feel guilty every time I think this way because I have 2 children to keep happy and alive. They are the only 2 people I will keep pretending for until we make it. Story 71. You have stopped taking care of yourself, such as brushing your teeth, wearing clean clothes, and washing your hair. Story 72. Trying to make others laugh, smile, or be happy in the hopes that they will reciprocate and do something to keep you going and make life worthwhile. Story 73. When it's hard to tell if everything is getting worse or if it's just you, it can be challenging to diagnose depression. Story 74. Lack of quality sleep does not necessarily lead to depression. Could be related to sleeping issues or anxiety, but for me, it is an early symptom. Story 75. When everything starts to feel like something you need to get over, even things you usually enjoy or avoid because you feel too tired or busy, even if you technically have time, it can be overwhelming. Excessive screen time, especially doom scrolling, contributes to this feeling. Story 76. Difficulty connecting with others and building lasting, meaningful relationships is often recognized as a sign, but it is something that is much easier to notice in hindsight. Story 77. No longer dressing nicely in public. I didn't realize something was wrong until I wore pajamas to the store for the 5th time in a row. Story 78. Overeating and staying up late just so I could use my phone because it is the only thing that gives me happiness. Story 79. The more earnestly I try to convince myself that I am not depressed, the more depressed I actually am. When I am not depressed, I do not feel defensive about my mental health. Depression leads me to believe that everything has always been difficult. Life has never been better than it is today, and the only thing I can do is put my head down and keep pushing to get through the week, day, or moment. Story 80. You watched Lars von Trier's Melancholia and thought the ending was impressive. You always prefer sleep to the company of others. If the only place that feels safe to you is your bed, that's okay. Story 81. Anhedonia, excessive sleeping, not eating, or overspending on unhealthy fast food because it requires too much effort to prepare meals. Story 82. I have a plant in my office. If the plant is wilting, it means I haven't done its weekly watering and care. That indicates I'm not doing well. I call it my depression canary. Story 83. Not showering. The thought of standing in the shower and going through all the steps to wash my body and hair is just too overwhelming. Story 84. Not motivated to engage in activities you typically enjoy. Changes in appetite and sleep patterns. Isolating yourself from others. Story 85. My patience with everything is wearing thin. Even activities I enjoy, like playing video games or watching shows, fail to hold my focus. I find myself needing to do something else, and this cycle repeats. I assume that the lack of dopamine in my system is a sign of impending depression. Story 86. For me, it was daydreaming about taking drugs to stop being tired, even though I have never taken anything. On my way to work, there was a road with a tree in the street that I had to drive around. Every time I passed it, I thought, if I hit that tree, I won't have to go to work. I am also a stress eater and gained a lot of weight during that period and leading up to it. Lastly, the sleep. When I was sick at home, the doctor put me on rest. I did nothing but sleep during those first weeks. I would wake up, read on my phone, and then sleep again. I slept until my stomach ached from hunger or my bladder was about to burst. Then I slept again weeks on end. In the months before that, I worked 7 days a week, either at work or at home. I fell asleep sitting in my chair sometimes. I remember once I was holding a cup of coffee, and my grip loosened while I was dozing off, spilling coffee everywhere. That was on the terrace at a cafe. I was just so incredibly tired. Story 87. Feeling overwhelmed and as if nothing you do is ever enough can leave you feeling exhausted. Story 88. For me, it was the distancing from friends. One day, I would feel excited to receive a message from a friend wanting to meet up and connect. Then, at some point, that changed. If I received a message from a friend, I would think, oh no, I might have to see them. That was the turning point for me. I went from wanting to be around people to wanting to be alone. Story 89. The things that made you happy earlier do not anymore. You are losing interest in everything little by little. Every minor thing that made you smile before is gone, and you do not feel anything. You are starting to imagine what life would be like if you had been able to do things differently. You want to sit and play video games as a little escape from reality. There is no hope in tomorrow, just another day passing by, and you are still waiting for something. But deep inside you know nothing is going to change. Little by little, you start living with that feeling, and sometimes that bubble pops, making you think about suicide. But you are too afraid to go through with it. You want it, but you start considering the consequences if you fail. Then you have a little break and start all over again. Story 90. You lose interest in your usual hobbies and cannot tell why. It is not burnout or exhaustion. It is just a lack of motivation to get up and engage in them. This is what happened to me right before I started to decline. As I began to recover, my interests returned. Story 91. In addition to fatigue and self-isolation, I was aware that I was experiencing symptoms similar to depression, but I tried to convince myself it was something else. Deep down, I felt ashamed to be depressed, even though I knew that was not the appropriate response. I was finally able to make some positive life changes once I realized and accepted this fact instead of rejecting reality. Story 92. I am experiencing this now. It always starts with a pulling sensation in my shoulders, as if my emotions are being loaded onto an invisible backpack. Story 93. Forgetting basic things, including names, concepts, and the items you intended to get from the kitchen. Story 94. I was primarily sleeping, but I was also sick most of the time and had a loss of appetite. I didn't want to eat the things I usually enjoyed, and even thinking about food made me feel nauseous, which was alarming because I am a foodie. I cried almost every day and started losing weight because of it. I wondered if I might be anorexic, but it turned out to be depression. After starting medication, I feel much better now. I am eating well and attempting to enjoy the little things. There is still a long way to go, but I can definitely see the difference. Story 95. One of the first signs I realized was that I used to find myself listening exclusively to sad or angry music, with no dance music. Story 96. The signs for me were: 1. I was always bored, even when I was doing things that should be interesting. I would lie there doing nothing, not because I wanted to do nothing. I hated doing nothing, but I couldn't think of a single thing I wanted to do. So I just lay in bed, tired all the time but couldn't sleep well. Hard time focusing. My grades started to slip because I wouldn't hand in assignments. I didn't mean to. I just couldn't bring myself to do them. My advice is to forget about how you feel and instead listen to what people are telling you. Look at the signs and the changes in patterns, as if you're an outsider. The biggest misconception for me was that I thought depression meant you were sad. I wasn't sad. If you asked me at the time if I was generally a happy person, I would say yes. When loved ones would say that I wasn't acting like myself, I wouldn't believe them. Of course, I'm myself. Everything is fine. I didn't have an explanation for why my grades were slipping or why I felt bored all the time and never wanted to do anything. But I was fine. I wasn't fine. Story 97. I had always conceptualized depression as being really sad all the time. However, I realized I was depressed when someone asked me what I was looking forward to, and I had no answer. I made something up in the moment, but it really stuck with me because I had never been without anything to look forward to. In that moment, I realized that nothing brought me joy, and I just felt blank. In hindsight, there were other signs, including not cleaning. Story 98. having an unusually good day for no particular reason, and also having less motivation to do things outside of your comfort zone. Story 99. For me, it was cleanliness. I am usually very meticulous about cleaning and maintaining a tidy room. I actually enjoy cleaning. After my 10-year breakup, I moved back in with my parents, and my room was a mess for a good 6 months. Story 100. For me, it's when I stopped listening to music. Depression, as it is, often goes unnoticed or unacknowledged, but it's the one thing that consistently occurs. Story 101. Here is one you may not notice. Your clothes are all gray or a similar monotone color. I noticed this when I went to the Veterans Affairs for post-traumatic stress disorder treatment. I was wearing gray Nike shoes, gray sweatpants, a gray t-shirt, and had just put on a gray hoodie and hat. I stopped and realized that if I'm serious about changing my life, I should start by adding some color to my wardrobe. While this won't solve the problem, it's an easy first step. Story 102. I thought I was just lazy because I slept the majority of the day and could go too long without showering. My family would always ask, "How are you so tired? You don't do anything." And they told me I smelled bad. I did smell bad. I have to admit that. It turned out that the idea of doing something felt so exhausting that I just couldn't bring myself to take action. One day, my wife said, "You're depressed." Turns out I have significant depression and severe anxiety. It has reached a point where I might not have eaten in around 24 hours, and I don't even have the willpower to get up and grab something to eat. Story 103. You look forward to going to bed. Not because you are sleepy or physically tired, but because you are mentally exhausted and just want a break. Story 104. Not taking care of yourself or your living space is concerning. I knew my place was a disgrace, but I was too burned out to care. Unless company was coming over, which was almost never. Story 105. Changes in sleeping and eating habits, the frequency of chronic pain returning, and the severity of the pain are all significant concerns. My biggest issue is the changes in the taste of food. Story 106. Some early signs I have observed are moodiness. My dad would be hypersensitive and angry as depression set in. There were changes in his appetite, and food no longer tasted good. Story 107. Checklist. Sleeping longer than usual or still feeling tired or lethargic. Changes in diet or eating habits, such as reduced appetite or overeating, often leaning towards heavier carb or fat-based comfort foods. Disinterest in activities, lack of motivation for things that usually bring joy, and diminished pleasure in previously enjoyable activities. Minimal to no sex drive. Distancing from friends, family, or support systems. Saying "I'm fine" out of habit or as a way to deflect. Changes in gut health, short, shallow breathing, slow speech or movements. Brain fog, forgetfulness, and feelings of being lost or out of it. Numerous resources are available online for self-assessment. If you feel you are experiencing depressive symptoms, please speak to someone in healthcare to investigate further, especially if symptoms persist for more than 2 weeks without significant changes. If you are in crisis, please call 988. Story 108. Not wanting to ever leave the house, my friends would try to persuade me to do things with them, but to no avail. I just wanted to stay on the couch. I realized that it is neither healthy nor normal. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.